We're talking team chemistry on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Is the Jalen Hurts, DeVonta Smith, A.J. Brown, and Dallas Goedert combination the best young group of quarterback and weapons the Eagles have had in decades? All that and more. What other combinations can we think of? All that and more on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Shout out to the everydayers for making us your first listen. I'm Louie DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. We're back after a few days off. Gino had his bachelor party. I had my brother's wedding, but we're back here talking birds. And Gino, it's not that long that we'll be talking about training camp battles, starting spots, depth pieces as well. Who's going to make the 53? Training camp is right around the corner. We've got OTAs and, there's some drama around the NFL with other teams and their weapons like the Bills and Stephon Diggs. And so football's coming up, man. It's been a good little break, but soon, before you know it, week one's going to be right around the corner. That's just how it works.
Happy to be back talking about the Eagles, especially because before we were talking on the intro here, I was down in Philly. I passed the stadium multiple times. I'm talking to all these people with Delco accents want to grab a hoagie down on the boardwalk.
I couldn't do the show with you anymore if you had that accent. Man.
No, thank goodness. But man, I really got back in the mood, and I actually was watching.
Once you see the motherland, it gets you back, man.
I was watching Game 4 of the NBA Finals with all my buddies at the FanDuel Sportsbook, funny enough, down there at Bally's, right? And you see the betting sheets, and up on the tickers, NFL Conference champions, NFC East champions, and you're like, man, it's getting close. Once all that stuff starts to come up and you really get back in the swing of, okay, this is the environment that we're in. And once again, Lou, it's tumultuous in the National Football League. There's a lot of chess pieces at play. The DeAndre Hopkins, the Delvin Cooks of the world. Is Saquon Barkley going to sit out? It's going to be rough for a lot of teams, but one team that seems to be all in and just have that motivation to get back to where they were is the Philadelphia Eagles.
No,
man.
it's a great point. And you look at, my brother covers the Buffalo Bills, so I'm very in tune with what's going on in Buffalo. Of course, grew up there as well. So you look at what's going on with them. And of course, I started thinking about this topic we're going to get into from a number of perspectives because A.J. Brown was meeting with the media. So was DeVonta Smith last week. They kind of talked about the bond they're forming and the entire offense as a whole. They're all young, around the same age. Played in college together, were friends before the NFL with Brown and Hurts and DeVonta as well. And of course, Hurts and Goddard have developed a rapport over the last few years, the last 3 years for sure. And then you look at a team like Buffalo and suddenly, Stephon Diggs reported to OTAs today, but there was a little rift. Yesterday he did not come to OTAs, mandatory by the way. Sean McDermott said that he was very concerned. Josh Allen even hinted at something off the field that's been going on, and he almost took a little bit of the blame, saying that they got to get that relationship back to where it was. And I think that is such an important aspect that, of course, some people just think is obvious, so they don't talk about it a lot. But man, is chemistry so important? The Eagles saw that too in 2020 and even the years before. And so Howie Roseman that's been a staple of his roster building, not just off the field, but on the field. And that's, part of all the Georgia connections, right? And, Alabama as well. But I think it's, even more important when it's quarterback and it's weapons, right? Because you have to be on the same page. It's not just about talent. When you're on the same page with those guys, it's so crucial. And when you look at the Eagles, there's no question about the chemistry with Jalen and his big three with DeVonta, Dallas, and AJ. So they're definitely lucky in that way. And it's a huge reason I'm confident this offense is going to continue to soar this year and maybe even be better in the passing game compared to last year, which is definitely tough to beat.
Taking a quick detour before we get to the quarterback wide receiver discussion, I want to touch on a couple points. One was you brought up, and one I want to bring on myself. Yeah, you brought up the Georgia connection, right? Yeah. One thing that I love to hear from Jordan Davis, and he said it multiple times now, is that when he's asked by reporters, like, oh, how's it going to be like taking Jalen Carter under your wing? Jordan Davis is like, it's not like a mentor relationship. Like we're brothers. Like it's so much beyond just what you see on the football field, right? Like they're actually friends in real life. And look at what's going on with the Eagles wide receivers and the quarterback. They're just playing in the DeVonta Smith softball charity event that he puts on last week. They're all best friends. And the thing that really scarred us as Eagles fans is we saw the worst of it, and why those Stephon Diggs type of interactions leave a sour taste in our mouth was
look at Wentz and Alshon, Gino. I mean,
that too. You could throw that in there as well. But I mean, we saw T.O. and Donovan McNabb,
or that, of course, the
one
obvious
of the most
one.
hated relationships ever.
And it cost them an elite, legendary connection. Gino, it only lasted 1 year.
It destroyed their way. So, Lou, let me ask you this. Let's say Stephon Diggs, things can't be fixed behind the scenes, and
the Bills are screwed, man.
That kills their window, does it not?
Because it absolutely kills their window. Because outside of that, all they have right now is Gabe Davis and what? I mean, they drafted Dalton Kincaid, and it absolutely kills their window. So it's not a coincidence the Eagles add A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, and suddenly their window blows up. Of course, there are so many different reasons, but this is a key, absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, it blew things up for the Eagles. It could have for Buffalo if they didn't get this right. For Minnesota, if they didn't get Justin Jefferson, I mean, they wouldn't be competing like they've been for the last few years. So it's so crucial, and I think you make a good point. It's like, obviously the leader, like the veteran young player mentorship relationship is very important, but I think it's also important having a lot of guys that are friends, that are close, that are the same age, because there's a level of accountability. Like when you're friends and you're holding each other accountable, I think that's even better. Like the chemistry can be even stronger. It shows the maturity of a team. And that's exactly what this is. Like, you're right. Jordan Davis is not Jalen Carter's mentor, but they definitely have an accountability where it's not like, oh, we're in class together. Like we're kids. We're going to, just not try in class. It's like, no. We're friends, and that's going to like make us even more disciplined. And I think that's what the Eagles have.
Who is going to hold Jalen Hurts more accountable than somebody who's been around him since he was a kid in his now offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson, and A.J. Brown, who was around him since he was recruited to Alabama back in the day, almost ended up going there because of Jalen Hurts, and DeVonta Smith, who had a great rapport with him. And I think you've seen that connection build, not just with those guys, but with that offensive line and with the tight end there in Dallas Goedert. And a lot of it, Lou, has to go back just to one of the most basic principles of just human makeup and trust. Like, why was there that rift between Alshon and Carson? I think there was a degree of trust that wasn't there that you see.
And I think the relationship off the field wasn't really that strong, Gino. I think they struggled to relate to each other. And I think Alshon also clicked with Foles a lot more. So I think a part of him was like, man, every time Nick Foles is out here, we click much more than Carson, just stylistically in the field. But yeah, personality-wise, it all goes into it, Gino, the relationship. And with Allen and Diggs, there is no issues with chemistry on the football field. So Josh mentioned that it was something off the field, and we don't really know specifically what it was. I've heard rumors about what it could be, but that's important. On and off the field, you got to have this team chemistry, especially at quarterback and with the weapons, because it's a timing connection, right? It's almost anticipation thing. And if you're on the same page, it can be absolutely deadly, especially if you're young and you can build this relationship for, 5 to 10 plus years. And that's what the Eagles have. They've really never had this. And we'll get into that in the next segment, where you've got a 24-year-old quarterback, a 23-year-old receiver, another 24-year-old receiver, and a 25 or 26-year-old tight end to continue to grow with. Normally, they've had a veteran quarterback and young weapons, or vice versa. So it's so important, and it's, I think, why this Eagles window, for a lot of reasons, is wide open, but this is absolutely a big one. And so you're seeing that across the league. You've seen it with the Eagles in the past, and you're seeing it right now with the present. I do want to continue this conversation, Gino, though, taking a look at what have been some strong bonds in this way for the Birds in the past that have helped them. So we'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Guys, today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. Make your way to FanDuel, because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's right. Hopefully you won some money on Gino's Denver Nuggets winning the championship. Hopefully you enjoyed it more than Nikola Jokic did. It didn't really look like he cared all that much. Home. And now in the Las Vegas Knights, with the Golden Knights, win the Stanley Cup. So right now you can bet on the MLB. We've got soccer season, the NFL futures. Before you know it, the season's coming. Get over to FanDuel. A $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's great promotions on FanDuel every day. It's a safe and secure app. You get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all of the action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Eagles fans, we're continuing on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Louie DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. And, we're talking connections today because we're seeing the importance of what Jalen's building with DeVonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown. We saw it last year. You would have thought Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown were playing together for 10 years because they had that rapport off the field. You saw it the same, I think, in 2021 with Jalen Hurts and DeVonta Smith. Who is the first guy Hurts threw a touchdown to week 1 in 2021 against the Atlanta Falcons? It was DeVonta Smith. And you're seeing across the league that when you don't have that, it can hurt you. It can, as you mentioned, I love the way you said it, it can kill windows. And the Eagles had that with McNabb and with T.O., and I think it happened a little bit with Wentz and, Alshon as well. So, and that's kind of what we mentioned at the end of the segment, Gino, is like they've had some strong connections over the last, let's say, like decade or 2 decades, but they've never, I don't think off the top of my head, they've never had a connection like this where it's a young quarterback and young weapons.
I mean, maybe the earliest days of Randall. I mean,
yeah,
quick days.
Like with, I guess,
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to get the exact dates and like how old they were at that time. But
you know what I mean? Like they don't have like Burrow and Chase. You look at not just Philadelphia, but Cincinnati. They have that, right? And Mahomes and Kelsey, you've seen them grow together. It's
like the Steph, Clay, Draymond,
right?
Like
Exactly.
That three almost,
or like
right?
to make another NBA reference, like Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic.
And I'm so glad you brought up the Nuggets, Lou, because you look at them winning that championship, right? And sometimes you see a team win it like Peyton when they beat Seattle, and you're like, okay, this window's over. It's all done. They had an older team. When you look at Denver, you're saying, who's going to compete with them in the West next year? Like they're going to be that team, and why? Because they took that route of identifying the players that were going to work for them, right? Like they needed Jamal Murray. Does Nikola Jokic work everywhere? No. Does he work in New York? Probably not in that high-stress media environment, but he works in Denver.
I hate it there.
Does everybody work in Philly? No. But does A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts, and I even think back to the end years of McNabb with a young Deshaun Jackson, man. Like if McNabb had maybe 2 or 3 more years of Deshaun in that offense, like if he was in his prime, what could have been? Like let's say you could have got Macklin and
if you could have got the Djax, Macklin, Shady trio to McNabb just a few years earlier
in like 03.
Because Donovan, it's crazy. I mean, McNabb, we're talking about these connections. He never had that. He had the 1 year of Terrell Owens, which was electric, right? But then the chemistry fell through, and I mean, he had Todd Pinkston and James Thrash and Freddie Mitchell. I mean, who was the most that he had a connection with, like Chad Lewis or running back?
I was going to say Chad
Westbrook.
Lewis.
Yeah, honestly, it was probably Deshaun Jackson at the end, just from 2008 and 2009. So the Eagles are really lucky that they have this connection and that the age lines up perfectly, where it's only going to get stronger because A.J. Brown is under contract long term. And Gino, I think we both agree Devontae's probably going to get paid next year. I mean, he's going to be eligible for a new deal.
You got to pay him, right? And you have to get in
100%.
Before the market just continues to reset, right?
Right.
I think
the earlier the better.
You're going to do it once again. And so to answer the question, Randall was 22 when he was drafted. He really got his legs under him the next season when he was 23. Mike Quick was 27 and didn't really play. So there's much bigger difference.
I guess maybe a tight end he grew with, but I mean, there have been some strong connections, for sure. Like you look at Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson, the chemistry they formed over 4 years was,
even
incredible.
With Macklin, man, like that 1,000-yard season 100%. He had with him.
Or you look at like Carson with Zach Ertz. They had an incredible chemistry too. I mean, Wentz and Ertz was definitely one. And how about the 2017 and 2018 playoff runs? I mean, these two had never played together, but they were perfect together just based on style. Nick Foles and Alshon Jeffrey, I mean, they won you a championship and nearly got you back to another one. And that's part of, I'm sure, Alshon's comments.
When you are evaluating players, right, and you're evaluating the quarterback position, you kind of want to help out his flaws, right? And Alshon exactly was that guy. The one element that scouting and a lot of the time outside of being a scout in the building that you're never going to know, do they have that interpersonal relationship that will go beyond the football field, right? And how great would it have been if Donovan comes back in 05 and him and T.O. were on the same page, and where could that have been, right? And what happens if Nick Foles and Deshaun and Shady and all those guys stay together?
There just wasn't a long enough time for these guys to grow, right? Because as you mentioned with McNabb, he's on his way out, and all these young kids are just coming in, right? Or T.O., the relationship was crushed, so you only got a year out of it. And with Wentz, like, he formed that with Ertz, but there wasn't enough stability at receiver for him to really grow with anybody. I mean, he had a developing chemistry with Jordan Matthews for a year, but then he gets traded the next year. So this is the first time for a number of reasons that they have this sustainable connection.
Why has it been until this year now, but since 2014, that the Eagles didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver?
Yeah, right.
Because of that interpersonal relationship, that trust. Even having somebody that's that good of a player.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
I'm not going to throw the ball.
Those guys.
Yeah, like, oh, Jordan Matthews, let me throw you a go ball that I'm going to throw to DeVonta Smith. Like, no way.
You got to have guys you trust on the field, too, to just put the ball up. Like, in the Super Bowl 100%. This year, A.J. Brown's got two guys on him. He's like, I'm going to put the ball only where Brown can get it. He's going to go up and get it. Nick Foles
to Alshon.
To Alshon in 2017. But look at the playoff run in 2018 as well. Some of the jump balls he was throwing to Alshon against Houston, and then in the playoffs against Chicago and New Orleans. It has to do with off-the-field relationship, as you mentioned, but stylistically, too. Like, Foles was more of a...
Bingo.
Like, post up, I'm going to throw you a loft over, down the field kind of, fade to Alshon, whereas Carson Wentz was more of an anticipation thrower, and it didn't really click as much with Jeffrey. He didn't like throwing the jump ball, like go up and get it kind of ball. So you have to click on the field too stylistically, and I think you would agree, like with Jalen, I think he's the right quarterback for Brown, Smith, and Goddard. I mean, Hurts is pretty complete at this point where I think he could work with anybody.
Yeah, if you were going to invest $100 million into a brand new car, but you didn't like the color of the car, I bet you wouldn't buy said car, right? And that's the thing with A.J. Brown. Like, he could play football, but if he's got like a faulty engine and like the starter's a little off, and it's going to cost you problems year over year over year to where you can get to this point of the tumultuous relationships that you have seen between quarterbacks and wide receivers in the National Football League. Like, the extreme, of course, is like the Antonio Browns of the world. I think you have the complete opposite of that with the DeVonta Smith. AJ will voice his opinion a little bit more, but I think it all comes from the sense of accountability, that all of these guys do have that trust in each other, and they're willing to push the envelope and get to that next level. And what is the ceiling with these guys, Lou? Because they're still so young and they still can continue to get better.
As long as they stay with the approach now and they're not fighting over
just remain healthy.
Right.
Exactly.
And you don't have, because these guys, they want the ball, and that's just natural for weapons. But 100%. I think Jalen Hurts did such a good job last year of evening out targets to, Smith had his games, Brown had his, Goddard had his. There were times that all three were dominating. I mean, all three were, if Goddard wasn't hurt, his stats will be right up there, and they were plenty fed. So, as long as they keep their eye on the prize, it's about the team, and they have that disciplined approach, and they're all getting fed, and they're all getting paid. It's tough. It's a delicate relationship that you have to, keep, and we've seen that in the NFL and with the Eagles in the past, but it's one that if it can keep clicking long-term, man, it's so huge. I mean, look at some of the dynasties, Gino, the Patriots with Brady and Gronk. I mean, they won championships with two teams. And then you look at, obviously, right now, Mahomes and Kelsey. Like that, they lose Tyreek Hill, and the offense doesn't skip a beat. You don't think that relationship has anything to do with it? Of course it does.
There's an adage in hockey, and I was actually talking about this the other day, that you have three guys on a line, right? But good coaches tend to put guys in pairs. And why is that? Well, if you have a good connection in pairs, like, you can kind of fill in the rest of it, right? Like, if you have those pairs with AJ and Jalen, and you have the pair with him and DeVonta and the rest we can figure out. It's almost like Andy Reid when he says how to build a team. Like, give me my quarterback, give me my two tackles, two guys to rush the passer, two corners, and I'll figure the rest out. That's really kind of what it is, man. And like, are you worried about running back right now? No. Why? Because you have X, Y, and Z being.
And I think they're going to throw the football
Dallas,
more this year, Gino.
AJ
so
Brown.
I think there's going to be even more opportunities for these guys to get the ball, because I think they're going to throw more. And I think Jalen's going to be even better when it comes to anticipation and accuracy.
Three guys at 1,000 yards would be crazy, man.
That'd be super cool.
Plausible.
We had two last year. Yeah, I think if Dallas Goedert doesn't get hurt last year, they're probably pretty
close.
And I think the attempts are increased this year. So yeah. And they've tried in the past to do this. I think in 2020, that was, again, the execution was terrible. The philosophy made sense though. I mean, how he wanted to build with younger weapons with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and with Jalen Reagor and John Hightower, Quez Watkins, it did not work for sure, but they've tried and it hasn't worked. Right now, it is 100% working. They're clicking on all cylinders. So, Gino, just to wrap up the show, we're kind of mentioning, a lot of the Super Bowl 52 era, right? Like, talking about Alshon Jeffrey, his connection with, Carson and, Nick. Same with Zach Ertz, too. And I'm thinking now, and just kind of, I was looking around the league before we started the show, and it's like, it's kind of crazy that on this team, let alone this team, but across the league, that team is, it's dwindling when it comes to like who still has a significant role in the NFL, especially when you go outside the trenches. Like, who are the best players in the league right now that are left over from that Super Bowl 52 team? There's not many. I mean, what is it, like Zach Ertz and I guess you could say Isaac Seumalo now that he left for Pittsburgh.
Probably say he's the most successful outside
by
of Philadelphia
far
at this point, right?
Yeah,
not
right.
Big
I mean,
V.
who else right now is Big V's hurt? I mean, he got paid though.
He got a bag.
I mean, Isaac
will make more money though.
Yeah,
he'll make more money in the long run than he does. But
yeah,
outside of that, like, why were we having this discussion earlier? Because it's like, why wasn't the window there after 2017 for this exact reason? And it goes beyond just that too. Like, I think you can look at that in terms of the cornerback position as well.
Well, they were all older too, right, Gino? So, I mean, most of that core, they're done, or the young players just didn't really pay. I mean, who's the best young player from that team? Honestly, man, it might be my boy Rasul Douglas. Like, of that young, the young guys from that team, I mean, who else is really doing it?
Jalen Mills has done okay.
He's done okay in New England.
Nelly's been around. I mean,
he's
Corey Clement really fell off there at the
Special
end.
Special teamers at this point,
LG's gone. Ajayi's gone. That
sad, man. They're all
most
gone.
is in Philly, and
most of the linemen are still in Philly.
Yeah. Tim Jernigan, is he still around?
I don't think so, man. Rodney McLeod had a decent year in Indianapolis.
Vinny's close to hanging him up, if I'm not mistaken. And
he was
linebackers. Now Ellerby was starting at linebacker.
That's great Eagles trivia, by the way. If you can mention that Ellerby was on that Super Bowl team.
Who was the starting slot corner in that game?
It was Patrick Robinson.
Yeah, Patrick Robinson doing nothing. Left Philadelphia.
What's Ronald Darby doing still? I don't.
He got cut by the Denver Broncos, so who knows what.
Honestly, Gino, the best.
How did that team win a Super Bowl? Like, if you really put that together and break it down,
the best combination of it just was the perfect lightning in a bottle season.
It was
100%.
There's no other way to explain that.
I'm thinking, like, outside of Seumalo, like the other guys that have been gone for a while, it's probably Zach Ertz on offense, and it's, I mean, Carson Wentz, crazy enough, is working with John Gruden right now in Tampa, I guess, so he's not even on a team. Nick Foles is done, right? And so it's Seumalo, it's probably Ertz on offense, and it's Zool on defense. He had the most fourth quarter interceptions last year with 4 with Green Bay, so he's still one of the top 3 starters with Jair Alexander and Stokes. So my boy Zool, it sucks. I mean, obviously the Eagles are okay at corner, but the fact that he's doing what I thought he could do, not in Philly, definitely does hurt for sure.
We just got to expand those windows, man.
But that's going to be Kelly Ringo. That I'm telling you, this is
all right.
That's the new guy.
Number 2.0.
He's Zool 2.0. Let's try again. I'm excited about Ringo, man, for training camp. I think he's going to be one of those guys we definitely watch in the summer a lot, because you're not going to get a lot of reps from him in the regular season. So preseason and camp will be where you really see where they use him and how his development's coming along.
And I brought up the idea of like having those combos at cornerback as well, right? And you're building your cornerback room kind of like that basketball team as well.
Lots of styles for sure.
Shifty, athletic guys like DeVonta Maddox. You have James Bradbury, who's built to take away like those bigger bodied guys, and Gritty. And I'm not going to say him and Slay are the same player by any level.
But they're speed corners.
Yeah, they're speed corners that are going to defend those guys downfield. And then Keely's just a guy that, man, he looks like he could go put on the pads and mine center field back there and play safety. He's a big boy. And I thought they did a pretty good job of that in 2017, right? Like that, and early 2000s, we're talking about these good teams in Eagles history and finding those combinations, all those guys who click really well together. And let's hope that without a star safety, that combination doesn't kind of go by the wayside, because on the other side of the ball, all those 4 guys are returning. the other side on defense, man.
Hey, PFF put Reed Blankenship on the potential breakout team for defense this year. They put Nakobe Dean and they put Reed
in the
Blankenship.
Super Bowl. What does he got to break out for? I think he already broke out, man. He was at the top.
You know.
Yeah,
I don't know though. I'm still banking on Sidney Brown, but it'll be fun.
Duncan Robinson, who played for the Heat, that's just like a made-up character. Like that's Reed Blankenship.
That is Reed Blankenship, but I'm excited for Blankenship. I'm excited for a lot of these young corners and safeties. I think the Eagles have. We mentioned on the show after the draft. I think this is the best group of young DBs they've had, in years.
Job and Eli Ricks, man. Like Eli Ricks is going to be on a roster, whether it's Philadelphia or somebody
just based
else.
on the length alone.
Job made the team last year, and even some of those younger receivers, man. I think the battle on the back end is going to be very intriguing because you still have like the wily vet and Greg Ward still. Was Greg Ward on that team, or was he a practice squad?
Practice squad.
So he has a ring. So
he's got a ring. He's got a ring.
You could say, oh well, he's in Philadelphia. We can't include him in that conversation.
Well, he's still kicking. If we count the Eagles, he's still around for sure. Yeah. Guess you got to mention
out of that guy, man.
I know. We'll always have 2019 for G Ward. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, and we're just going to keep reminiscing about random Eagles stuff.
No kidding.
Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We'll be back tomorrow. Make sure you find us on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Hit us up on Twitter at LockedOnBirds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase, Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. Let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.